Welcome back. Let's take a look at what the market looks like now. It certainly has been an interesting market picture across the board for most of the past few weeks. Indeed, it certainly has been all about the vaccines. Where to from here? And what does that mean for the recovery of the global market space as well? Will the market begin to recover very soon, or will that take some time? Of course, we saw the early inoculations out in the United Kingdom as well. The United States said to get that BioNTech and Pfizer vaccine as well coming to the fore. Will that pick markets up as well? The Federal Reserve out in the United States is also expected to begin their meeting tomorrow. It is the final meeting of the year. Perhaps not so much more bond buying, but perhaps a little shift to perhaps where the market will look like and what things will look like going into next year. Perhaps the expectations as well. Very interesting to note, however, that the economy of China, that's set to go up 2% despite the big falls that we've seen in the economies of the rest of the world, as the rest of the globe unfortunately still suffers a recession. China managing to pick itself up and now will rise 2% this year as well. Let's get into what the numbers sort of look like then as well. Generally speaking, on the local front, we are a little bit higher today. We're around 1/3% to the good, more than 210 points gained, just below that 60,000 point mark. So when one considers where we sat just after March, or when the coronavirus broke itself, it certainly does point a much better picture for the local index and does tell you that we are headed in a positive direction as well. Resources managing to gain 0.7%, but the financial seems to be one of the big gainers today, 2.2% rising there. And that's boosted up by the banking shares, which have gone up 2.4%. If you take a look at the top right-hand part of your screen there as well, banking shares sitting at 6,823 points. As we said, financials are taking a big rise there. Industrials, unfortunately, going down 0.4%, but the big losers, the gold mining shares, they've lost out 2% today, so not doing too well out on that front. Let's take a look at the commodity picture very quickly as well. Brent crude is now back at $50.66 against the US dollar, or rather for a barrel, should I say. That's on the bottom right-hand part of your screen there as well. 1.3% to the good today. Gold has fallen off, though, ever so slightly, but it still does sit at $1,824 a fine ounce. Platinum holding steady above $1,000. It's at $1,014 at this point in time in this trading picture. As we noted as well, the general market across Asia and Europe also headed into some positive territory today. And that's really because of more vaccine news, the hope that that recovery will indeed come through into the rest of the market. Yes, we don't have a Brexit deal yet. How will that impact things? We'll have a chat about that in a moment or two. Very quickly, onto the currencies. We're at 14 Rand 98 against the US dollar. Now, the local currency did hit 15 Rand and in fact surpassed that figure again. Does that mean there's a little more weakness on the local front? We'll also unpack that in just a moment or two. Today, we're better off, though, by around 0.9% for the local currency against the greenback. 2/3% weaker, though, against the British pound. We're at 20 Rand and 12 cents. It's 18 Rand 21 if you're looking to get yourself a euro. Let's chat then to Gary Boyson from Rand Swiss as we unpack this market picture and get a bit of the answers to the questions I just asked a little bit earlier. Gary, thank you so much for the time, but appreciate it. Vaccines, vaccines, vaccines. It seems like that's all the market is looking forward to. Does it look like they're looking to vaccines as a panacea for not just growth, but really an uptick in market movement too?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It doesn't matter what the fundamental news is in the world at the moment. As long as there's optimism that we'll have a COVID-19 vaccine, stocks keep going higher. I think it's important to point out just how difficult the environment is. So we've got Germany going back into a hard lockdown. We've got talks about hard lockdowns in California as well. So while the market is trying to price a world in which we have a vaccine that has a 95% efficiency rate rolled out to everyone, the fact is that we've still got a little bit of work to do before we get there. So let's hope we don't see a market correction if anything should go wrong with the rollout.
Yeah, it certainly does become very wearisome because we don't have that final word on where exactly things will go on that front. Also, the U.S. Federal Reserve set to kick off its final meeting for the year tomorrow. Any major expectations, or is it really just a case of, look, let's wait and see, because we don't really know where things are going to go from here?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always nice to just get an understanding of exactly how the Federal Reserve is looking at financial markets and where they see their bond buying program. Of course, at the moment, there's zero chance of any interest rate increases, well into 2021. I mean, probably out to 2022 as well. So we're going to have lower rates for longer, and that's in part helping to fuel the enormous rally that we're seeing in asset markets. So stock markets around the world rising largely because of this. So it will be interesting to see, but I don't think anything major expected from the Federal Reserve this week.
Yeah. Speaking of fueling things, the oil price, that's coming back to $50 a barrel then, right? So I thought that was very interesting. At some point, it looked like 40 to 45 was just the benchmark, and we may hit that to the remainder of this year. But again, is that vaccine related?
I think it is, on the one hand, you've got, oil price is always a function of supply and demand. So on the one side, yes, we do expect higher demand because there's a vaccine. We expect people eventually to get back to work, and that should feed expectations of higher oil prices. On the other side, there is a little bit of a supply concerns as well. So we had a tanker explode near Saudi Arabia this morning. And that's just, I think, nothing to do with, it's not going to take any major supply out of the market or anything like that. But it just highlights the tensions around the Gulf region and, how vulnerable they are to supply shocks. If you do see, production dropping off in the Gulf region for whatever reason, be it geopolitical or because of OPEC plus output curves, you would expect oil prices then to rise on the back of that as well. So at this stage, I mean, oil markets do look fairly balanced, but at the same time, there is some concern that there's an underinvestment, just an underspending on capex from some of the big oil firms. And if we were to see demand picking up very rapidly, there could potentially be a serious drawdown on oil inventories, and that certainly would lift oil prices further.
Yeah, the last time the rand was at around 15 rand, I mean, yes, 14.92 odd was mid-February, but 15 rand odd was still around March. So surely we're faring a little bit better here when it comes to that rand picture. Perhaps not necessarily our own doing, though?
Yeah. If you look at what's happened this month, I mean, we've obviously caught a couple more ratings downgrades, and I think we're heading. Obviously, we've got the president speaking this evening, and we could potentially be heading into further lockdowns. That said, our currency is remarkably robust given the difficulty that we've got, in the domestic environment. I think a lot of the negativity has already been priced in. But as you say, I don't think this is a lot to do with what we've necessarily been doing as a country. This is far more to do with international portfolio flows. With the low interest rates that we've got in the international environment, even a 3.5%, 4%, 5% yield that you can get on South African bonds or in the South African money markets means that we've seen a huge flood of foreign capital moving in through portfolio flows, really coming into our bond markets, and that helping to lift the currency. The problem is that portfolio flows are notoriously fickle. So should we see any sorts of changes either internationally or locally, they move just as quickly. It's one of the reasons that our currency is as volatile as it is, one of the most volatile currencies on the planet. So at the moment, foreigners definitely liking South African bonds, and that, those inflows from November certainly helping to buoy the currency. But should that trend reverse, which it can very, very quickly, there's I think a good likelihood that we'll see the currency moving back out towards 16.50.
Yeah, could be in one moment, out the very next. Speaking of situations like that, MTN getting themselves in a pickle every single moment. At least once every year since 2015, there's been something. And this time around, of course, it's a matter that has been prolonged for quite some time. An issue with terrorism out in the Middle Eastern region. But now it's getting seen off by some other authorities out in the United States.
Well, at least in Nigeria. So you've got, so like MTN obviously fallen dramatically on Friday. And this was really on the announcement that Constitution again auditing the various SIMs. I'm sure the viewers will remember what happened to the MTN the last time Nigerian regulators started getting involved with Nigerian SIM cards. That absolutely enormous fine that was levied. We have got MTN up over 7% today, and this is really a bounce back from Friday. I think as nerves have settled a little bit, higher oil prices actually feed into MTN strangely because Nigeria is so reliant on higher oil prices. But if you have a look at it, the listing of MTN on the Nigerian stock markets, MTN's revenue, Nigeria makes up about 30%. So it is very important. It's about equivalent to South Africa. But with the listing in Nigeria, that has helped to just broaden the shareholder base. So I think any regulatory penalties from Nigeria on the company this time around will be seen as penalizing the Nigerian people. And that potentially could just alleviate some of the fears. And I think that narrative starting to feed through. And that could be the reason why you're seeing the share price moving a little bit higher today.
Yeah, so does MTN remain a good investment? I ask this because we've continued to say it's generally a good business, but unfortunately, they just seem to have these flawed investment scenarios and situations that they're kind of stuck in because they're good markets for them.
Well, you look at it, I don't think it's necessarily the way that MTN operates its business. It's the fact that MTN is operating in very, very difficult territories. Nigeria is a notoriously difficult place to build businesses. I mean, we've seen multiple companies, the likes of Tiger Brands, going into Nigeria and really getting burnt. It's operating in places like Iran and Syria. And I mean, they are exiting some of their Middle Eastern operations. But as a business, the ability to operate in difficult geographies does provide an opportunity for investors, albeit at a slightly higher risk. So if you compare MTN to Vodacom, Vodacom's market capitalization is almost twice that of MTN. Although MTN has vastly more subscribers. So if you buy into the idea that MTN will get some of these regulatory issues ironed out and the territories they operate in become a little bit more stable, I think there's serious upside in MTN and certainly against Vodacom, which has a smaller subscriber base, although operating in less risky environments. So overall, yes, I think MTN is still a very good investment for clients to make. Looking at analyst ratings, it's still one of our top picks in the local environment.
Yep, you just have to make sure, I guess, that you're very, very, very long-term on MTN. Gary, thank you so much for the time, but appreciate it. Gary Boyson there is from Ranso, is helping us unpack the market movement then as we kick off the week this Monday afternoon. All right, 1/3% to the good is the state of the JSE All Share today, and even the local currency faring slightly better, still around 15 Rand against the US dollar. We'll get into some economic news then for you right after the short ad break. Stay tuned. You're on point.